Because that device can be so seamlessly integrated, I think most users would just lose the notion that there is even a camera in the room. So there's a psychological component of, as I think about it, to having technology integrated in that it becomes seamless, almost invisible. And of course, it just works.
I do have concern for some of the coworkers I've worked with over the years, because I've watched people who would literally slouch on the table, as if they were about to take a nap in an in-person meeting, who have managed to always be vertical and looking exceedingly present and aware of how they looked when they could actually in the room with the obvious camera there.
Ah! How do you manage to sleep standing?
This week's episode, France is moving to a secure and sovereign AV platform and dropping Zoom and Teams. Windows 11, it's got problems. PS&I has help from Microsoft Enterprise customers. And what will memory costs do to audiovisual? Gosh darn it. And what will memory costs do to AV? All that and more coming up on AV Week. This is AV Week, episode 754, Unseen AV. This is AV Week, your weekly wrap-up of the biggest news and stories in the AV and IT world. I'm Patrick Norton, in for Tim Albright, who is attending ISE 2026. You can expect a big wrap-up of news from the show in Barcelona next week, but there is still plenty of news to cover, so let's get rolling. Are you running a secure and sovereign UC platform? The French government is phasing out Zoom, Teams, WebEx, in fact, all non-European meeting apps with the year-old open-source Visio platform by 2027. France expects to save €1 million in software license fees for every 100,000 users, and this move follows the signing of a declaration for European digital sovereignty last November, led by France and Germany, to mitigate digital dependencies. You've been having trouble with Windows 11? Hey, it's not just you. The latest updates for Windows 11 has been a bit of a mess, in some cases requiring multiple emergency fixes. Users have reported applications like Outlook not working properly, being unable to shut down their computers, or in fact boot them in the first place. Microsoft is investigating reports of boot failures and other IT-related headaches, and rumor has it we'll be focusing on making the Windows 11 you have now work for the rest of the year. Speaking of Microsoft, PS&I Global Alliance has announced a strategic alignment to support enterprise customers using Microsoft Workplace solutions. This partnership will give PS&I certified solution providers access to the AI-powered tools from Microsoft. PS&I Director Tom Roberts said, quote, Microsoft technologies are deeply embedded in enterprise environments worldwide. This alignment strengthens our ability to support enterprise end users by ensuring our global integrator community remains closely connected to Microsoft's workplace innovation and delivery standards. And pour one out for Meta Horizon Workrooms. It is set to be shut down next month. The VR platform was meant to be a collaborative space for users to work in the same space remotely in a virtual setting. But by February 16, the users will no longer have access to the app, and any data associated with it will be deleted. This also coincides with Meta's decision to discontinue sales of their headsets for business, alongside laying off roughly 10% of the Reality Labs division. And a quick self-serving shout out to my employer and AVNation's owner, CTI, who just won the 2025 Integrator of the Year for Talent Development. CTI was chosen by the NSCA, Commercial Integrator, and their sister magazine, Security Sales and Integration. CTI's Department of Labor registered apprenticeship program for AV technicians, the first in the industry, was a big part of this recognition, along with the company's boot camps and desire to train the next generation rather than waiting for them to magically appear ready to integrate near you. No debt, earn as you learn, nationally recognized. I work for CTI, but this is good stuff. That's news for this week. Keep watching. This week's roundtable discussion will focus on what the insane increases in memory prices are going to do to AV over the next year, and the joy of hiding AV gear out of sight. Welcome back, everyone. It is time to introduce the delightful crew on this week's roundtable. Joining us to hash out the greatest problems in the audiovisual industry. Apparently, I'm feeling a little dramatic this week. Brittany Delgado is a key account manager at Midwich, making sure her clients get what they need to communicate better every day. Welcome, Brittany.
Thank you.
Dawn Meade has all the experience doing high-level AV around DC for agencies I can't name because Dawn just stares blankly when I ask about them. She is, by the way, on the hunt for her next opportunity in AV, so reach out to her and we'll give you the contact information to find her if you don't LinkedIn, which she's pretty easy to find on at the end of the show. Welcome, Dawn.
Thanks for having me, Patrick.
Willie Franklin was the senior technology specialist at Otterbein University, bringing AV into higher ed. In retirement, he's bringing the jams at Franklin DJ and Event Services, LLC, and my notes say a master troubleshooter.
Yes, indeed. Great to be here along with my FM dipole antenna, because why stream when it floats in the air for free?
There is nothing wrong with that at all, having knitted wiring in the attic of my parents' house at the other end of Pennsylvania, with my dad going, "Why is there 70 feet of copper in the rich?" Is this your ham radio, Dad?
It's good stuff.
It is good stuff. Oh, not so good. If you're not aware, if you're listening, you're not really aware of the recent bump, he says, euphemistically, in the cost of memory. I am jealous. Let me give you a short summary of what's been reported. We have an article linked to a pretty good series of articles at The Verge. They're talking about it all over the place. The Verge's title is RAM is Ruining Everything. And last summer, you may remember, memory was cheap if you're a PC enthusiast or having to build an office PC. 32 gigabytes of DDR5 could be picked up for 80, maybe $120 if you're getting something fancy. In October of 2025, OpenAI secured deals with SK Hynix and Samsung. Those two companies, by the way, have approximately 70% of the RAM market in the world. Add in Micron, and you've got roughly 93% of the RAM market in the entire world covered. But OpenAI secured deals with SK Hynix and Samsung for 40% of their RAM output from each company. Prices started to climb, and the same sticks today are easily $300 to $400. And before you say, "I'm not a gamer, I don't use a desktop," try to remember that RAM is in everything, including commercial AV gear like TVs, video bars, everything you use to feed the signal into your video wall. I won't even get into phones, the compute in your conference room. Panel, and I know at least one of you had a discussion this morning about this one. How are you thinking about how the cost of memory going stupid, to use a highly sophisticated technical analysis term, is going to impact integrations this year?
Well, I guess I'll go ahead and kick it off since I had to have a discussion about it this morning. I honestly think right now in our industry, we're not really looking at it how we should be looking at it. It's going to be kind of a situation where when we start running out of things, it's like, well, why? And then the RAM conversation will come up. We'll be after the fact. Nothing new over here. But I really think we need to start pre-planning. And as a distributor, coming from that side of the industry, it's very, very important to start having these conversations now, especially considering our buy cycle. People are now still looking at projects into Q3 of this year. And if you think you're going to be able to get, these chips at the same price as of today, it's not going to happen. So it's really important, I think, as an industry, we need to start talking about it now. We need to start preparing for it now. That way we can avoid what happened, during the COVID times, the dark days, when we couldn't get our hands on anything.
Yeah, Brittany, I couldn't agree more. And I like the fact that you preface it from a standpoint of the buying cycle. That's very important when one thinks about planning for the future. I immediately kind of pivot, and it's my brain. I pivoted to draft beer. From a standpoint that if you're in that industry, you're probably buying your hops and barley well in advance before those products come to market, before they are come to yield, right? The same thing is happening in that chip market. If you're trying to plan for innovation next year, the year after that, but that massive amount of chips have already been bought, a little tongue-tied here today, already been bought for the next 3 quarters, you're basically behind the 8 ball before the race even starts. And that's unfortunate. So I think anyone who's looking at it really needs to be having serious conversation about what they will be doing as a company, as integrators, as distributors in the months and in the year ahead, really.
Willie, I could not agree more. And I got to tell you, a lot of it, I think, has to do with a lack of transparency in our industry, but also in the world at large about how interconnected and exactly where and how the various tech industries and tech products come from. Back in 2022, I taught a class at the very first InfoComm after COVID out in Vegas on the supply chain collapse. And we talked about it then. Nobody understood the fact that the chip shortage at that point that was causing so many backups, so many delays, was because the raw material, the silicone used for chips, was the same raw material they used for vials for medicine. And suddenly this massive piece of the supply chain was unavailable or rerouted to other means, and the prices went up. People didn't understand that the same glass factory building the large screen displays builds every single one of these that we have. And this is a bigger market overall than some of the big screens. So all of that got rerouted. And it's a similar thing here. People don't understand that the same companies, the same chip manufacturers that are making chips for AI farms are the ones that are responsible for all of the products that we use. So when they aren't aware of this thing, and we've gotten so spoiled over decades of inexpensive, easy to access technology, that when something like this comes along, 2020, 2022, today, we're not prepared. And so we need to start educating. And as you said, think long term, get our customers thinking long term, let them realize that this could change. This could change in a minute. There could be a strike at the ports. There could be a new set of tariffs. There could be any number of things in today's global interconnected economy that are going to cause our products, our projects to have massive delays and massive cost overruns. And not planning for that is the death knell, not just to AV, but to technology in general.
I like it when someone's even as wound up even more than I am, because because part of what I wanted to say is, how are we feeling as a group about our positioning versus, say, late 2020, 2021, when the wheels were falling off the entire just-in-time supply system. My favorite story was basically a guy that was running a manufacturing facility who had been fighting for years with corporate. They were like, you can't order more than, 60 days supply. And he typically was pulling 6 to 9 months, I think the story was. And his unit was literally the only thing bringing money into the organization for months. And everybody looked around and was like, maybe we can not just in time quite so tightly. I mean, are we feeling, is this as scary, or, is this more scary than COVID supply chain issues? Or does it feel like it's going to start creating something that's just as atrocious as the supply chain issues in COVID? Because that's the other thing, is nobody is expecting, best case scenario, is either OpenAI collapses and breaks all their contracts, and there's suddenly a ton of memory available for sale, which will still take months to figure out how to get into products, or B, that we get to 2027 and there's enough capacity available at that point, because the massive AI facilities for this year. But I don't hear anyone saying memory supply is going to loosen up before 2027. I mean, Dawn, I think you sound deeply concerned. That would be an understatement.
I am deeply concerned, but we also have to look at it this way. We need to start the education process now. We need to start thinking ahead and planning now. But it took us, the 40s, the 50s, the 60s to get all of the offshoring and the just-in-time, and all of those things took decades to develop. Well, now a lot of us in the business world, we weren't alive during that. That was our parents. That was the last generation that got us to where we are. It might take another generation to get us back out of it, but we need to be preparing in advance, look at where we've been and start thinking, maybe we do need to keep 90 days worth or 3 months, 8 months, a year worth of product in hand, even if we're going to say we're just in time. Maybe we need to start planning with that in mind. And then if we end up with a glut, hey, we can have sales. You know what I mean? It's easier to sell something for a little less money as a perk for the customer than it is to say, look, we got nothing. You're out of luck, because AV, we're vital, but like chips are in medical equipment. Chips are in things that are required for life and death purposes. So if there's going to be a global shortage, we're not the only ones going to be hurting unless we're in the hospital requiring some of this. You got to think big picture and start the education process now.
And it's a very big picture, because of course it also includes automobiles and everything else at this point. Brittany, you're calling somebody Monday morning next week. Where are you starting this conversation with them?
Well, the first thing I'm going to see is if they've even heard the news, because I am wondering if even anyone's even thinking about this at the moment, besides us that, really rely on the supply chain. Being in distribution, the supply chain is very, very important to us. We need to be able to have product available to keep these projects moving. if I have to make a phone call on Monday, I am going to ask, hey, where are you at with some of those LED projects? Because LED is an industry that I think people aren't really going to understand the amount of chips unless you work with it on the daily. How many chips are involved in just one singular LED wall? And I'm not even talking about just the processor or controller. I'm talking about the chips in the panels. So those are going to be the conversations that we have. Have you heard about this upcoming? Where does this project stand? I think it's time for us to discuss the timeline, the purchasing timeline, and also availability and securing in-stock inventory here in the States, because it is going to become a problem. And, like Dawn pointed out, these chips are in other industries, not just our industry. So if it comes down to it, is the AV industry going to be prioritized, or is that medical industry saving lives going to be prioritized? It's definitely something we have to consider and think about now and talk about right now. Not to create panic. No one should go out and panic buy, but you have to talk about it.
I feel like that the education piece is very important. So to both what Brittany and Dawn have shared there, I find a part of the educational challenge is, during COVID, when the supply chains were broken, there were a lot of things that were very visible that we could see, that we could understand. Lack of personnel at the ports. We can understand shipping manifests that had to change. We can understand empty factories. But when I look at this challenge, it seems to be more boardroom related, more corporate positioning, market share relating. In other words, who amongst us at a glance can see the growth and data centers and the amount of chips that are needed for that? Who amongst us could easily see the advancement that we're seeing in robotics that rely heavily on chips as well? And certainly when we think about AI, we hear it, but who amongst us see all the granular detail that's involved in making it work? So you kind of are forced to back engineer as we think about our roles and developing the infrastructure that makes it all possible, right? Gone are the days where you could easily associate cause and effect. And one of the simplest example would be if one thinks about the bird flu and needing to destroy a massive amount of chickens, not to depress anyone, but all of a sudden the price of eggs go up, right? So if you're a bakery and you're trying to put a product out there and fulfill a series of orders, but now your costs have gone up exponentially, then the person who buys that donut, that croissant, whatever product you're putting out, now pays more, right? Simply because of the bird flu, the destruction of those chickens, the lack of eggs, and the increased price of eggs. It's very similar to what we see happening with chips and the pricing. But unfortunately, it's not so visible because the problems are huge, right? And I can't help but wonder behind the scenes how many high-level boardroom discussions are going on, how much litigation is going on, how much lobbying is going on to allow those three powerhouses of companies to basically gain and maintain a tremendous amount of market share. And to be gut level honest, while you can open up a bakery here and there, not to besmirch anyone, chip manufacturing is highly specialized, right? It's like medical equipment. Not everyone has the capacity to do it. Don touched upon the need of raw materials and how those raw materials are shared in a multitude of industries. And then how do you create such a unique product without having a clean room and all that infrastructure demands? So yeah, it's to think about all the granular components kind of make my head spin. But the educational piece is very important. And how do we get that out amongst our peers, amongst distributors, manufacturers, and of course, the end users?
Yeah, and you're right on. It's the education part that's going to be vital. So, if you're like Brittany with a distributor, if you're an integrator, if you're a company that uses these products as end users, but you're the AV guy in the company, go talk to your bosses. Go let them know that this is going to be an issue and start bringing it up. If you used to work with Willie or you're a member of HETMA, go talk to your business department. Get them to start teaching your business students, your people that are going to be the future leaders, that are going to be dealing with supply chains like this, and tell them, hey, you need to be aware that this is coming, because in today's world, unless we get an EMP that blocks out all technology in the planet, we're going to be using chips. It's going to be around. So this is not a problem that's going away. So we got to start somewhere. We got to start today. The old proverb, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is right now.
And it's pretty wild looking at this, because this is all triggered by OpenAI's Stargate project, a $500 billion project spread across, I think, 6 different locations. They're talking about 7 to 10 gigawatts of data center capacity, because apparently we now measure data center capacity by how many cities it will power. I'm exaggerating slightly. But I mean, literally, if they build it out, if this is all built out by 2029, there's somewhere in the neighborhood of 7 to 10 gigawatts, which is what New York City uses in a single day. This is like black swan territory. This is like a meteor striking. This is like COVID. This is, $500 billion being dropped on one massive technology expansion in a very short period of time.
And Back to the Future, we thought 1.21 gigawatts was a lot, right?
It's still a lot of electricity. But as I said sometime back in mid-2020, the next person who thinks, life is not interesting enough just gets ignored for the rest of the week. Anybody who says may you live in interesting times gets slapped. After that bright and cheerful discussion, I was giggling with joy because a friend of mine walked up to my cubicle and was like, have you seen this? This is so cool. And then sent me all of the links. And it's Logitech's Rally AI camera, a discrete conference camera with AI-powered features designed to disappear. And if you haven't seen it, they literally have it set up so you can embed a box behind your sheetrock in the wall. And if you're a certain type of AV pro, like the one that initially introduced this one to me, you might start tearing up. It's a really clean installation. It's got a paintable cover. There's just a little slot remaining, and nobody can grab the head on this PTZ camera to try to yank it around. They got it set up for single or multiple camera deployments. It's ready for MS Team rooms and Zoom rooms. And I have to say, the right side 2 grid view demo is something I would like to try. And I really, at this point, have used too many AV. I don't let me go off on UC and how someday I hope it to actually work in my personal presence the way it works in the demos. But is hiding this stuff the next evolution of conference room and huddle room design? Is that where we're all moving towards? Because I really kind of shocked me. Even, I was looking at it, I was like, this is like nice. There's not a bunch of stuff hanging off the wall.
Aesthetics matter, man. It looks sleek. It looks cool.
Yes.
It can really fit in, especially on some of these boardrooms that you see where you have a glass wall and they want the fine table, and all of a sudden you just have this weird camera in the corner, right? So Logitech is really doing something with this to be able for it to be discreet. And I love what you said about not being able to touch the camera, because end users never do that. Never do that, right? Yep. Never try to self-help, ever. So yes, I'm personally excited, and we are Logitech partners. So we've been hearing about this for a while. So I was excited to see that it's finally coming to fruition. So
I agree. It's pretty darn sweet. It truly is one of those products that makes me want to jump back into the game and integrate it in. What I truly like about it is the ability to conceal it. It's an impressive piece of technology. Mm-hmm. The other thing I like about it, much like what you said, Brittany, one of my core functions was to assist in keeping the help desk staff calm. right? And it's amazing how often people will attempt to troubleshoot things themselves by grabbing, twisting, breaking, pulling cables. And at the 11th hour, will call and swear that they have no idea how it got moved, how it got disconnected. So to conceal it and have it be sleek, I love walking into a room that offers sleek technology. And the other piece of this that's a big win for me is, as I think about all the Zoom interactions and the conference calls that we may all be on, even this call, there's the self-objectification that psychologically we fall into, right, when we see ourselves on our own device. Because that device can be so seamlessly integrated, I think most users would just lose the notion that there is even a camera in the room. And now they begin focus on the distant audience. They begin focusing on the interactions of individuals in the room and at the remote end without concerning themselves about the technology. So there's a psychological component of, as I think about it, to having technology integrated in, that it becomes seamless, almost invisible. And of course, it just works.
Yeah, I agree entirely. I'm going to sound really old here. I promise I'm not that old. But in the years that I've worked in AV, we've gone kind of through phases. And back in the late 90s, early 2000s, or maybe even mid 2000s, there was a phase of hide all the tech. We don't want to see any tech. And then it slowly came back out. And all of a sudden it was, we want to see all the tech again. And the fact that we're going back towards that, it's beautiful. As Brittany said, aesthetics matter. When you're dealing with C-level executives, the big money folks, they want these gorgeous, fantastical, beautiful boardrooms and conference centers and meeting spaces. This is going to be remarkable. And as long as the price is right and the technology works, it'll spread even beyond the C-level with the big companies with the unlimited budgets and be applicable almost everywhere. Now, caveat, AV people, we know, always use the right tool for the right job. At my former employer, even in the C-suites, we probably couldn't use anything buried in a wall because certain industries and certain requirements for security require visible cabling, visible and inspectable pieces of equipment. So it's not a product for us, for them. But it very well could be a product for higher ed, for corporate, for nonprofit, for basically anybody in the world, unless you're in one of these small verticals, not small verticals, but you know what I mean. So I'm excited to see it. I am excited to see it in person. I want to see the quality of it. The whole Rally family has traditionally looked and worked pretty good. It's been a great product. I'm excited to see this newest entrant and to see how sexy it looks, just hidden in the wall there. I agree, Willie. It's going to be great when people can forget the self-consciousness of being on camera and staring at the lens, and just be more organic.
Yeah, I may have to stop by a couple of local integrator shops just to see if they have one integrated in their conference room, just to check it out. It would be a good opportunity just to pop in, have coffee, and talk tech.
Yeah, I would love to see it in other places outside the conference room, places where you normally wouldn't see cameras, just fear, a general public in that kind of space, like thinking like museum lobby, you know what I mean? Hospitality things where you never really wanted to have your tech just kind of out there on display just for fear of someone bumping into it, taking it, something happening. So this can definitely even come outside of that, to standard conference room UC space too.
Oh, absolutely. At some of these experiential art places, Avixa with the X is Experience AV. Some of these experiential art places where they bring you in to the experience, having a hidden camera, again, makes you less self-conscious and can really make it feel like the magic is there.
I do have concern for some of the coworkers I've worked with over the years, because I've watched people who would literally slouch on the table, as if they were about to take a nap in an in-person meeting, who have managed to always be vertical and looking exceedingly present and aware of how they looked when they could actually in the room with the obvious camera there. So I think that, it's also maybe a generational thing.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody right in this group is going to be like laying across a conference table in the middle of a conversation, but
Well, and hopefully they think ahead to things like that. Like, the embedded ceiling mics that we use, the Shures and the Yamahas and whatever, they have a little light on them that tells you when they're on. The Logi camera I have on my tripod right here that I'm looking at has a little light on to show that it's working. So, maybe it's hidden in the wall, but there's a little indicator light so that beware, you might be on camera.
You might be in a meeting you didn't remember. Oh my goodness. Working backwards. Well, first of all, I want to thank everybody for joining us today and bringing your thoughts and opinions and ideas. And it is wonderful. I got to work backwards from our introduction. Where can we find y'all if folks want to hear what you're doing or ask you questions? Willie, what's the best place for people to track you down?
2 permanent locations, first being LinkedIn, Willie Franklin. You can find me there. And of course, you can reach me via email at franklindjservices@gmail.com.
All right. Brittany, where can folks track you down?
All right, so you can find me, obviously, LinkedIn is always a very popular choice to connect, professionally, Brittany Delgado. And even though I'm not going to be at ISE with the Midwich team, I do want to make everyone aware that Midwich does have a presence at ISE. And if you have time, swing by the booth, Hall 3, booth 3P700. So love for you to connect with us.
Excellent. Dawn, folks are looking or thinking about in your next stage of employment, where should they go look for you?
You can absolutely find me on LinkedIn, Dawn Meade, M as in Mary, EADE on the end, just like the fort and the general. You can find me throughout the rest of the socials at AVDawn. You can find me hanging around Infocom, maybe not ISE, but the Infocom show. I try to make it too and teach out and volunteer with. And of course, you can find me here every 6-ish weeks or so, whenever Tim wants to hear me blabber on about things, on AVWeek.
Thank you all for joining us this week. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have been tortured by my presence on the show, I assure you Tim will be back hosting next week. This has been episode 754 of AV Week. I'm Patrick Norton. Thank you so much for joining us.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.